Okay. It is 10 o'clock, so we're going to start up. I tell you what, since we have so many subs today, Representative Dolan, would you like to lead us in the pledge as an honorary sub? Okay. We're going to open up the public hearing for Senate Bill 404, directing the Department of Health and Human Services to submit a report regarding the establishment of child care workforce child care assistant pilot program. I'm going to welcome Senator Whitley. Good to seeing you again. I guess now we're reversed, right? Like I was there
Long
this
time no
morning.
see. Where it's a child care morning, so our committee is also currently talking about child care. So thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Becky Whitley. I'm honored to represent Senate District 15, which you are in. It includes the wonderful communities of Concord, Bow, and Hopkinton. So today I'm honored to introduce Senate Bill 404. This is legislation which, as introduced in the Senate, takes yet another very important step towards addressing childcare shortages in New Hampshire. I think, as this committee is well aware of, addressing childcare shortages in New Hampshire remains a true economic imperative in New Hampshire. Of course, both for our families, our businesses, and really as our potential as a state to build a modern economy that continues to grow as our state ages. Access to quality childcare allows parents to remain in the workforce, achieve economic stability, and contribute to the economy. But without adequate care, we won't be able to address the ongoing workforce shortages our state is facing. So just to put some numbers to this workforce shortage that we frequently talk about in the legislature, currently there are only 28 workers for every 100 open job positions in the state. That's pretty startling. And I think that's why you see a lot of the business community coming to the table right now to try to address this problem. I just want to throw out a little more numbers if you'll indulge me. There was a recent survey, a national survey of children's health, and over 5,000 parents with children ages 0 to 5 reported job changes due to problems with childcare. So that includes parents who had to quit a job, not take a job, or change their job because of problems with childcare for our little folks ages 0 to 5. As I mentioned, the lack of affordable childcare is also a significant issue for New Hampshire businesses. It is impeding our businesses' ability to recruit and retain a workforce, and of course, to fill critical vacancies. We see it all across the state. This is, of course, limiting opportunities for the growth of our businesses and stifling their potential for economic success. That's why the Business and Industry Association was a big supporter of this bill and continues to be a supporter. Now, for the startling reality, we are on the verge of a federal funding cliff, as the chairman knows well, in the childcare sector. Uh, and and in the face of this federal funding cliff, New Hampshire's total childcare workforce continues to shrink. Our workforce behind the workforce is shrinking, and of course, that decreases the overall availability of care for working families. We can continue to see childcare centers lose our younger workers due to low compensation and benefits. Yet those centers in New Hampshire who have been the most effective in retaining their workforce have offered subsidized childcare slots to their employees, offsetting a very significant expense for their workers with children. So now to this legislation. This legislation, as originally introduced, allows child care workers to essentially automatically qualify for the child care scholarship program. Now, I want to be clear that because wages are just necessarily low in this sector to keep childcare affordable for families, wages are so low that many individuals that this program would impact already qualify for the child care scholarship. So that means we're just trying to capture a few more families that are falling through the gaps here. So I want to sort of and put some more numbers to what I'm saying about how low the wages are. In New Hampshire, the median hourly wage of childcare workers is only $12.99 an hour. These are our folks to me, are heroes that are taking care of our most precious citizens, our children, and allowing our parents to go back to work, right? Can you imagine trying to support your family on $12.99 an hour? I can't. So back to the original version of this bill, this proposed policy change, creating this automatic eligibility for childcare workers in the childcare scholarship program. The policy as originally introduced would also streamline the process for the worker. As we know, there's a lot of administrative burden, and it would also streamline the process for the centers, capturing more eligible staff and reducing the application burden. We hear a lot, and the chair speaks a lot about the regulatory requirements upon childcare centers. This is yet another way to streamline this process. So I think what we're talking about here is the creation of a benefit for childcare workers, and this is essential for so many different reasons. Other states have recognized the effectiveness of this critical retention strategy and have actually implemented this policy with a fair amount of success. There are way more knowledgeable people that can speak to what Kentucky has done and others and how effective that has been. So I would ask you to really consider this policy as originally introduced in the Senate because it's smart, it's cost effective, and it's a really simple change that could have a significant difference, make a significant difference for our childcare workers and the sector at large. Retaining needed workers, recruiting new workers, who may view early education as a supportive career for raising families in New Hampshire. I want to note that the bill as introduced in HHS, we did amend it. That version passed the Senate HHS committee unanimously and then on the floor with a voice vote. And I would ask the committee to consider reinstating sort of the guts of the bill, either as introduced or as passed by Health and Human Services, not as it is coming over to you today. You will see that it was essentially gutted, and that's what you have before you. So I would ask you to go back to the original bill as introduced or again as passed out of HHS. I am happy to attempt to take questions, but again, there are so many folks behind me who know the sector so much better than me. Thank you very much for your time today, and I respectfully ask for the committee's support of Senate Bill 404.
Yes, Representative Wallner is recognized.
Thank you. Senator Whitley, how was the bill different, what passed out of Health and Human Services as to how it came into the committee?
It
The
came into
original
the
bill.
committee as, it came into the committee as, actually creation of this benefit going forward permanently. And what came out of HHS was more of a pilot program. Thank you for that question.
Yeah, I had basically the same question is if you could just briefly just run through like what happened to this thing because it is so different than I mean the Senate passed a nothing burger at the end of it. Like
Your
what
words, not more mine, Mr. Chair.
anybody who can read what happened? I know it's not on you as an individual, but like, can you just like go through like what happened here? Because I don't, speaking personally, I don't even want to look at the way it was presented because it's like a nothing burger. So like, what happened?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So there was broad support for the policy, and there was a lot of work done in HHS. So I think policy-wise, the Senate is in full support. I think because we are I'm not on Senate Finance, but my understanding is that because there wasn't a clear sense of the revenues going into the spring and summer, that this was sort of a placeholder. So it's not that the Senate doesn't support the policy. They very much do, pass in a voice vote. But my sense is that because of sort of the lack of clarity so early on in the year on revenues is why that sort of, as you said, nothing burger was passed as a placeholder.
Any further questions? I'm sorry, Representative Page.
So my understanding is that there were a lot of assumptions, maybe faulty assumptions, that went into the fiscal note on the original bill. Can you maybe outline some of those assumptions?
Yeah, so I wouldn't characterize them as faulty at all, but I think it is worth sort of exploring. One thing I think is, and Karen Ebert and other folks from the department have worked, really hard on this policy, but I think it is important to think through who we're talking about and how many families, right? So again, we're trying to create this benefit for childcare workers to automatically qualify for the Child Care Scholarship Program. But a lot of those folks already do. Like, I want to be clear about that. A lot of them already do. And also, not every single child care worker in the state has children, right? So then we have to think about, of those that sort of fall through the crack, don't already qualify, how many of those families, of those workers actually have children? So that's another important consideration to think through about how many people we're actually talking about, because many of our childcare workers, we have folks, older folks in the sector, but what we're trying to do is retain those younger folks that do have children. And so folks behind me can sort of describe that, but I think you're right that we need to sort of push through the assumptions on the fiscal note and think through the small amount of families that we're actually talking about here. Thank you for that.
Any other questions? Yes, Representative Walner.
So the pilot program that came out of Health and Human Services, was there new assumptions used for that fiscal note? And if so, what were they?
I believe so, and I believe so. Thank you for that question, and I will defer to the department behind me on those. Thank you.
Any other questions? Again, and we are going to talk to the department of the fiscal note because it's like it's interesting math. Any other questions from the committee? Thank you, Senator. We'll get you back to your committee. I know you're doing the Lord's work over there too, so thank you so much. Next up, Cora Hope. Cora, it's good to see you again. I'll get your name right this time. Thank you.
Hello, committee. I'd like to thank you guys for listening and just being a part of this change in childcare. My name is Coralyn Hoppy. I'm the Executive Director of Rochester Childcare. I currently am licensed for 170 early learning from 6 months to 5 years, and then I can be licensed up to 400, currently my school age program, but right now we have about 241. I'm coming here with 3 different kind of perspective stories. One is as a parent, one is as a business owner or a nonprofit business executive, and then another one is from a child care worker. So when I was a parent, well, I'm still a parent, back when I was a younger parent, and I had 2 kids in childcare, I went into the childcare field to help subsidize that cost. My husband is a master electrician working for the union, and even with the 50% off my childcare, for 2 kids in childcare, we constantly struggled. We even struggled to pay our electric bill, we struggled to pay our housing, and this was back in 2016. So even then, I felt the struggle as a parent, having to choose between paying my electric bill or getting groceries for my children. My center that I currently work for was the place where I also received my child care. So the money came directly out of my check. So that was money I never saw, but it was completely debilitating if anything ever happened. If my car needed a repair or we got into some sort of debt, or for example, at my HOA right now, we are currently assessed with a special fee. This is a $500 fee added onto my bill. So right now I'm in a position where it's much better off and I don't have the struggle that I used to, but now I am watching my workforce go through the same struggle that I went through. They oftentimes have to choose between getting a repair done to their car or having suitable child care. Sometimes they try to do subpar care where they go in between family members, but really the child is the one who is heavily affected by this constant change. Our children are heavily affected by our lack of self-regulation. So I'm going to quote my program director for my early learning: a well-regulated teacher only can support a well-regulated child or help support children regulating themselves. Our teachers are not in a good spot. Right now, I pay my lead teacher $17 to $22 an hour. New Hampshire Fiscal Policy Institute highlights that a $23 an hour is our wage that we're really competing against. That's the medium wage for the state of New Hampshire. So I am not able to compete with McDonald's or Target. In fact, I have to figure out other ways to subsidize costs to help support my workforce. But this is getting harder and harder. I have a teacher who does not have a child, but currently had a house that was bought up by a developer, and her rent used to be $900. Her rent is now $3,000. So it doesn't matter how many jobs you find. That increase is not something she can withstand. And on top of this, if this was to happen with a child, what kind of devastating effect that would have on on their development and on the family's development. So I come to you as a business owner. If I'm able to subsidize the cost of this care, I can then put my money into wages. I will increase my wages. I can increase my capacity. I can then afford more insurance. My insurance has almost tripled. Liability insurance is a nightmare right now just to access a child care provider. So if I had this cost subsidized, I would be able to find better insurance perhaps, or I would be able to offer more benefits like family health insurance to help maintain my workforce. But unfortunately, we're still in a spot where we're just trying to make it by. Thanks to the scholarship increases and the eligibility increases, we will heal, but because of the mass losses that we saw this year, it's going to take much longer than I ever predicted. So when you allow for this kind of subsidizing to happen through the state, I can better predict my trends. I know coming in, I have 4 employees who need infant care, which this is a true fact. I have 3 employees going out on maternal leave, and I need infant care for 3. I would then be able to afford that cost and trend that in and be able to offer that care. And then when I'm able to trend better, I might be able to offer more infant care to outside community members. But until then, it's really watching it month to month and responding to business month to month, which isn't always good when you're dealing with children and their families. So I come to you as a mother, I come to you as a worker, and I come to you as a business representative. Please reconsider the bill back when it was. And I'm neutral at the bill right now, but if we were to go back at the original bill, it would really help improve the way that I do business and the quality care I can offer to the children, because that's who's truly suffering right now. That's it. Any questions?
Other questions from the committee? Hearing none, thank you. Next up will be Ariel Warden and Chrissy Trainer from Gorham, all the way from Cullis. It's not quite your people, but almost your people, right?
Thank you, committee, for hearing us today. My name is Errol Warden. I'm coming to represent the Coos County Child Care Director Network. And do you want to introduce yourself, and then I'll lead up?
I'm Christine Trainer from Little Sprouts. We operate 3 centers in New Hampshire, and I'm also a citizen of the state.
Good disclaimer.
Yeah.
So I'm here today on behalf of the directors in the North Country, just saying that we need action. And from what has come out of the Senate Finance, that is not a bill with action in it. We need to be able to either bring the bill back to its original intent, or at least have a pilot where you can get solid numbers and support going out to child care centers as soon as possible. The best thing would have been if we were able to do this 5 years ago or 2 weeks ago, but since we can't go back in time, today would be the time for action, not just another study to postpone really what we know we need. Thank you.
So I lead recruiting for our centers, and we have not just the 3 in New Hampshire, but we have 36 others across several different New England states. And I can say that as an industry, we have about 94% of this workforce who identify as female, and 50% of that are identifying as mom. So while not all of those children are aged 0 to 5 years old, at some point they are that age, and being able to add this as a benefit would not only act as a retention tool, but also as an attraction tool to the fields, because as stated, the wages are low, especially when we look at what other hourly jobs in the state of New Hampshire is paying. I think that's $23.04 an hour. So while our centers are paying very similarly to what Cora's is, it's still below by $1. So anyway, this would, if we could bring the bill back to what it was originally, that would be very attractive to the field and workers coming in. Thanks for hearing my testimony.
Are you taking questions?
Me?
I mean, it's a question I ask of everyone. Will you be taking questions? Then you say yes or no. If you say yes, then I turn to the committee. If they ask questions, usually they don't ask any, and we move on. But so would you like to take questions?
Sure, we can
Okay.
take questions.
Are there questions from the committee? And then, all right, so now seeing none, thank you so much. It's yeah, geez, yeah, yeah. How's your day going?
It's going great.
Yeah. All right, next up will be Michelle Merritt with New Futures. Ooh, that text has slipped out there a little bit there, the Futures. Sometimes that Houstonian makes an appearance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, honorable members of the committee. My name is Michelle Merritt. I'm the president at New Futures. I do have my colleague Rebecca with us, who you might remember, who's often before this committee. But I'm speaking to you today on behalf of New Futures and some of the coalitions that we work with around Senate Bill 404. For those who are not familiar with New Futures, we're a nonpartisan, nonprofit policy and advocacy organization. We've served as New Hampshire's Kids Count organization since 2016. There was a Kids Count organization in every state, and New Futures is the New Hampshire designee. Over the past year, again, we've worked with a group of community partners and stakeholders to identify policy priorities in the early childhood space, specifically to address issues around childcare workforce and workforce development. So presently, again, you've heard some of this because I know that you've been going around the state. New Hampshire has a vacancy rate in childcare of around 26%. The impact of this is that many providers are suppressing enrollment well below their licensed capacity because they simply do not have the teachers to be able to fill the rooms and operate the classroom. A common experience that we've heard anecdotally in convening some of these partners together is that there is a struggle to retain younger workers who often leave to take positions in the public school system where the compensation and the benefits are more robust. The data available on the early childhood workforce really does support this experience. Workers between the ages of 20 and 24 represent the largest share of the workforce. About 23% of childcare workers fall within that age bracket. However, if you were to look at the next age bracket, by the age of 25, more than half of these workers leave the field. And again, it's because they're taking positions that have either greater pay or greater benefits. The average childcare worker in the state of New Hampshire makes around $32,000 a year. And if they had an infant and a 4-year-old, these are just using statewide averages, they're going to be paying about $28,000 a year for the care of those kids. Staying in the workforce in this situation is really tough for these individuals. They have to make a choice in some cases of paying their entire salary for childcare, and that just economically does not make sense for individuals and their families. Centers who have been the most successful of retaining workers in this age bracket have offered subsidized childcare slots for their employees who have kids under the age of 5 or under the age of 6 specifically. Kentucky took note of this. It was raised by Senator Whitley. During the pandemic, they used some of their flexible funding to pilot childcare subsidy for childcare workers. This program was so successful that they ended up making it permanent. It aligns to closer to 500% of FPL, I believe. But again, this strategy was something that Kentucky codified as a result of some of the early outcomes and results that they were seeing around workforce retention. So as introduced, Senate Bill 404 took the lead of Kentucky. We were trying to make sure that we were having something that would work for New Hampshire, that offered a similar benefit to New Hampshire's childcare workers given the crisis that we're facing with recruitment and retention. Unfortunately, the concept, even though it was unanimously supported by the Senate Health and Human Services Committee, passed the floor without objection, was amended in Senate Finance to be significantly scaled back. We have concerns that at this point, as it's currently before you, the bill contains absolutely no promise of this concept ever seeing the light of day in New Hampshire. Given the fact that this is where we are, where the vacancy rates that we're seeing, challenges in opening classrooms, this is unacceptable. We urge this committee to consider amendments that would revive the underlying concept to bring it back to what it was that the Senate Health and Human Services Committee recommended, that the advocates and others had worked with the department to put forward, that we believe if we can get back to that language, this is not only an innovative, but it's truly a cost-effective solution to some of the real challenges that we're facing in this state right now around childcare workforce. So I'm happy to take questions. And again, New Futures is happy to also work with this committee around amendments to bring that concept back.
Okay, are there questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, Megan Rabeck. So close. It's It's one of the beauties of being chair is you just get to butcher everyone's name.
Megan Brayback. um, thank you all for having me today. My name is Megan Brayback. I live in Newmarket, and I am here today representing the thousands of Save the Children Action Network supporters across the state. SCAN is the advocacy arm of Save the Children, and we're building bipartisan support to make sure every child has a strong start in life, and that includes working to ensure kids have access to early childhood education right here in New Hampshire and across the country. As you've heard, New Hampshire is experiencing a childcare crisis. I won't reiterate a lot of the points that have already been made, but there are vacancies in the workforce. The cost of childcare is unaffordable for people in the workforce and outside of the workforce, which means that this is an issue that has ripple effects across the economy of our whole state. High quality early childhood education prepares children for a lifetime of learning. But so many kids, especially ones from lower income families, never get that opportunity. The childcare industry needs significant long-term investments to give every child access to high quality, affordable early learning and ensure that the workforce is well trained and fairly compensated. SB 404, as originally introduced, was an innovative approach to this issue. Again, as you've heard, this bill, I don't want to reiterate things you've already heard a million times, but obviously the bill as originally introduced would have had impacts not only on the child care workers themselves and their children, but also families across the state, as many more spots at child care centers would be able to open up for those families and allow them to go back to work as well. In its current form, this bill, is really nothing much more than a study. Without any way to implement the forward-thinking solution. So I urge you, as my colleagues have, to amend this bill to restore it back to its original intent. And I do have copies of this testimony if you would like them.
Excellent. Yes, we would like copies. There are questions from the committee? Hearing none, thank you. Last up is Brian Clark from DHHS. Mr. Clark, I don't believe you visited us before, have you?
It's my first time, I think.
Okay.
And you got my name right.
Oh, well. Yes, I did. Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
Brian Clark, I'm General Counsel for the Division of Economic Stability. I have with me.
Good morning. My name is Karen Hebert, and I'm the Director for the Division of Economic Stability at DHHS.
So we are neutral on the bill. So the bill as currently drafted would have the department create a report, and the report has no appropriation with it. So we would have to use just publicly available information to try and glean information on the effectiveness of the pilot and put that into a report. I'm available for questions regarding any version of the bill.
Other questions from the committee? Yes, Representative Cretion.
So in looking at what the bill as amended does, the report, so is the pilot program actually established, or is it just a report saying what would be needed to establish a pilot program?
I believe it would be a report on what would be needed and the potential effectiveness of a pilot program.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Walner.
Thank you. I wondered if you could go through with us some of the assumptions you used for the pilot that was coming out of the Senate Health and Human Service Committee.
Of course. So we had to use the best data we had to try and gather the.
Can I stop? Representative, you're asking about the first amended version.
Mm-hmm.
Would you be objectionable if I preempted your question and go to the original bill? Because before we go to the amended, not to step on you, if you're okay with that,
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Because you're.
Go.
I'm trying to go all the way back. You're going
Okay,
two
go
steps
all the way
back. So
Yeah, that's
can we
fine.
go back to the original bill as introduced? Because when I saw this fiscal note, it was like a campaign of shock and awe of. So like the total scholarship fund is like $26 million roughly, right? From the feds. how the hell do we get to $26 million just by adding childcare employees that are not already covered? Like, it just seems, I'm not trying to be rude here, but it just seems like laughable on face value. Because like I've read over this methodology very rudely while people are testifying like 5 times, trying to figure out like how that happened, because it just makes no sense.
So the introduced version of the bill as written would have childcare workers categorically eligible for the full benefit of childcare scholarship.
Okay.
So it did not just add workers who were not already eligible. That is what the as amended by the Health and Human Services version did.
So they took the ones, actually the ones that was very rude. They took the workers who are currently covered and they included them in that bucket.
Yes. Yeah. So the question is, what would the introduced version of the bill, with no amendments, have done? It would have made every worker,
It would have shifted the funding source from this for those
Right.
workers from the state scholarship fund to the general fund.
and because we wouldn't have been able to guarantee compliance with federal requirements of 85%, under 85% of the state median income, it would have been entirely general funds.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So that answers the first question, because I read that and I was just like, we haven't legalized it yet. You know what I mean? All right. So now we can go to Representative Wallner's question about the amended version.
Just I wondered what assumptions you were using for the pilot that came out of Health and Human Services in the Senate.
Okay, so we used American Community Survey census data to estimate the likelihood that workers would be eligible based and have children within the age ranges that could receive child care scholarship. So one of the assumptions was that child care workers would be no more or less likely than other persons in New Hampshire to have children, and that their age ranges would be the same. We made the assumption that only 2-income households would have income over 85% of the state median income, based on the assumption that if the average wage of a childcare worker is $12 to $13 an hour, that they would already have qualified. So it was really only married households or partnered households that would need the categorical eligibility pilot. So we made that assumption in narrowing down the exact number that we thought would be impacted.
Yes, go ahead. Sorry, Representative Wallner. I'm having
So-
college flashbacks here.
I'm sorry.
Um,
So when you're doing those assumptions and you're estimating how much funding this would need for the pilot, did you also put into consideration that the workers who would be eligible, they would be above the 85%? Did you also factor out that they would pay 7% of their income towards the tuition?
Yes, we did. So we reduced the benefit by an expected household income for that range. And then we also cut out some households with potentially really high incomes because they wouldn't have an incentive to apply for a program if there would be no benefit. So yes, we did that too. Thank you.
Great. Is it possible do you still have all that fiscal note, that the work that went into that? Do you have that available?
Yeah, we can send that to you.
Okay, thank you.
Clearly, this is going to need work, so I'm going to let my subs go. We're not going to vote on this today. We will exec it. We will exec it so we can work on it, but they can go off to EDA because this is clearly not happening today. So I'm going to thank you guys for your time. Appreciate it. Your services are no longer necessary. Your services we will be entering into executive session. We will not be calling a vote, so you know. Actually, I don't even think we have a majority. I couldn't call a vote if I let them go if I wanted to, so it doesn't matter. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Just want to honor their time. So you know, just so you know, Representative Warner, I'm going to schedule, because this is an early bill, it has to be out by next week. So I am going to schedule the vote for this next week at 10 a.m.
Day,
Wednesday.
Wednesday, okay, thank
Just so you know, I'm literally going to send it. We're going to keep this hearing going, but I'm going to send that off before the deadline, so it doesn't get missed. Yes. Just kidding. You're more than welcome to hang. You're sub for the day. You're more than welcome to stay. Just don't need to hold you here needlessly. Yes.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out that if a reinstatement of previous language or previous amendment is going to be considered, just to note that if we were to initiate a pilot, it would require system changes, which we will not be able to implement until January 1st of 2025. If we want a one-year pilot, that would be the effective date for that pilot, or however many years. The number of years for that amendment, I think we selected 2.5 years. We want to be able to collect robust enough data to really have a solid understanding of the outcomes, to see the value of such a program. So that was the reason for the length of that particular pilot. So that should be something to keep in mind. But the effective date was really important for us.
Further question? I guess for Creation. Sorry, I'm
Um,
trying to run an email.
with that in mind, would there be a benefit to skipping the pilot entirely and just implementing the program?
That's up to the committee, I think. Yeah.
In terms of data collection and things like that, would that simplify things on your end if you didn't need to? Or would we be able to implement it sooner?
We
So
wouldn't be able to initiate even a permanent program any sooner than January 1st.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions from the committee? All right. Seeing none, thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak to Senate Bill 404? All right. Seeing none, Mr. Clark, can you grab me that blue sheet over there, since I let my entire right flank go? Thank you. Okay. Spoke. There were 2 people signed in who did not speak, who were neutral on the bill. Online for the House, I read the Senate report earlier. It was overwhelmingly 400 something, but in the House, Senate Bill 404 was 9 support, 2 oppose, and 55 neutral. A lot of neutral. I don't think I've ever seen that many neutral. With that, I'm going to close the public hearing on Senate Bill 404. We're going to open the executive session for Senate Bill 404. Like I said, we're not taking a vote, but we're going to talk about this. Representative Warner, do you have any opening comments?
Well, I would definitely like to see us do a pilot and take a look at the amendment that came out of the Senate, the first amendment that came out of the Senate, out of Health and Human Services, not this one, not the one that's before us, not that one. I would like to have us go forth with that. How much? Let me ask one more question. Okay.
Without objection.
So how much was in the amendment that the Health and Human Services Senate Committee, how much funding was needed?
So Brian Clark on behalf of the Department, General Counsel for Division of Economic Stability. Yeah, I believe that's correct.
2.5? And how did it break down? How much would actually be the benefit for the workers, and how much for the department for the work they would do? Okay.
Helping them get there.
So it would have been $122.08 a week
122.
times the number of,
Oh.
times the number of workers, which we estimated, or not the number of workers to the number of children who are eligible, which we estimated to be between 350 and 450 roughly.
Great. And how much of the total appropriation was 2.5 million was the total? How much is for the direct benefit for the families, and how much is administration by the Department of Health and Human Services?
So it was $250,000 for system changes. Other than that, we didn't have administrative costs because it would use our existing childcare scholarship process.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other questions before we let Mr. Clark go? All right. Thank you. Okay.
Actually, is our rep from
If you're going to ask, go ahead. Yeah. Yeah,
is
go
our
ahead,
rep
put
from
on.
New Futures still here?
Yes,
I
I'm
thought
sure
of a
they are.
question.
Yes.
Can I ask her?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, without objection, it's fine.
Thank you for coming up again. I'm sorry I was so busy typing that I didn't make
No,
it
that's
to the
okay.
question. I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about the pilot program in Kentucky and how much that ended up sort of costing and what were the sort of outcomes that they saw that made them choose to
Yeah.
hold on to it
Rebecca, I don't know
permanently.
If you want to join me, if you have other information, it might be something that we can supply the committee afterwards. Obviously, the way that things are set up in different states is significantly different. Also, the population in Kentucky is much larger than in New Hampshire, so there would be some work that would need to go into determining some of that, like how it would compare to a population of our size. But
Yeah, and I'll say one distinction in Kentucky is that they used a lot of state funds to allow true categorical eligibility for all childcare workers. So it's distinct and different. So the cost would be vastly more than what we're looking at here. So what was proposed here is really our own New Hampshire approach to something that is going to be beneficial overall. I'm happy to send you some information on the Kentucky pilot program, how it was implemented, and then actually the finalized statute as well, if that is of interest to you. Great.
yeah, so the only thing that I'll add again is that as the bill was originally introduced, it was this Kentucky type of a model. In order to contain some of the costs in New Hampshire, we went with the pilot. The amendment was a cascading eligibility that then essentially took scholarship, added additional steps beyond the 85% cliff for scholarship, and only those that were childcare workers would continue to receive some level of essentially a scholarship, but be paid with general funds after that amount until it phased out with the steps. So it was leaning into the existing structure of the state scholarship program in New Hampshire, and that's the substantial difference between as it was originally introduced and what the pilot is. There's no reason, in my personal opinion, why we couldn't do that same thing that's contained in the pilot in that version as it came out of Senate Health and Human Services and make it permanent if that is something that the committee would like to do. But it is vastly different from the original to the second version. The second version definitely maximizes use of existing state funds and leans into the state scholarship program design.
Service Walter, yeah. Sorry.
I have another
I'm
question.
deep in thought here.
I have another question for the department. I'm sorry.
Can't get enough. First time up, we can't get enough.
I know. As I was
Because
just
you're wearing the Colts,
thinking about it.
If you're in Indianapolis, people wouldn't be so upset, you know?
I'm from Indiana originally.
Indiana. Oh,
That's why I have a Colts lanyard.
We root for the Patriots.
oh, is that who we're?
Yeah, that's all right.
Okay. So since even the pilot can't start until January of 25,
That's correct.
all we need in this biennium is 6 months of funding.
6 months of funding and $250,000 for the
yes.
system changes. Yes,
So
that's
all
correct.
we really need is an appropriation for not 2.5 million, but we need somewhat less than that. We need about about 120 million, about 1.2 million.
I believe it's a little more than that, like 1.3 or 4.
Okay, because the 250.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so it is, the appropriation could be less.
Hold on.
I'm gonna get the Jeopardy music.
So yes, the appropriation was for the high end of the estimate, and so we estimated a range, and they appropriated the high end of the potential cost,
And they did it for a year.
half a year.
They only did it for half a year? Or a whole year?
Let me double check.
Okay.
Why? While you're looking that up, I know the original bill factored in. We said the original bill factored in the workers who are already on the scholarship in that number. We don't
That's
have to include them. They could stay on the existing scholarship, or do they have to come off?
That's where the amendment came in. We felt we could cascade, as was a word used earlier, so that if you qualify for the scholarship, then you should receive the scholarship. But
Yeah.
for those who were over income for the scholarship, we zeroed down the number of possible participants. What we also did was looked at, because we wouldn't be able to start until halfway through the fiscal year 25, funding was for 6 months of that pilot, and then we wanted a robust pilot enough to collect sufficient data, making it a 2.5-year pilot. So for the first 6 months, yes, it is.
So who qualifies for the pilot program?
Okay, so
No, I don't mean the workers. I mean, how do we determine who is on? Is it a selective pilot, or is it a free for all on the state? Like, what is it?
so by pilot we meant it would be initially running for 2.5 years.
Okay, so it's not a pilot program. It's just starting this up for 2.5 years. So pilot's not really a.
Yeah, we didn't limit it to a specific region of the state or otherwise. It's a statewide 2.5 year program. If a
Yeah.
worker works 25 hours a week at an eligible provider, they could apply.
Yeah. There's nothing more permanent than a temporary program. So I don't even want to call it the pilot program because like the name just like makes my blood boil. The scaled down program, or the one that's I don't know what to call it. Let's call it option B. That one, it cascaded down and it hits like it hits a minimum benefit at some point, or at some point you're just no longer eligible.
So the pilot program, the option B, as you called it,
Yeah.
had a 7% cost share like the childcare scholarship. So if a family started making enough money that their cost share would be higher than the cost of paying privately for childcare, we just kind of assumed they wouldn't be interested.
Yeah. So 7% of their gross income for the family.
Yes.
Do math. Okay, sorry. You do your math. I'm gonna do my math here real fast.
So there's no income limit per se, but yeah. It would kind of depend on the age of the children and the
Yeah. That's what I get. Any other questions from Mr. Clark for the DHS while we hold them hostage here? Okay, thanks. Thank you. Well, we reserve the right to drag you back up here.
Thank you.
Hmm. 500%. Let me go back to the chart. Oh, I just closed the whole chart. Oh, that sucks. Can I bring it back up? Yes, I can. Restore window. Okay. Yeah. It's good seeing Representative Schultz. Here we go. They all got it. They're like, yeah. They're like, bye. It's just they didn't really say goodbye. Okay. So currently we cover family of 2, which is single mom. That is a mother and a child, single mother. $72,000 is our cap out, right? Nodding heads, yeah. That was Jan 1 from DHHS, Bureau of Childhood and Development and Head Start collaboration.
May I ask a question, the audience?
Yeah, sure, go for it. Yeah.
Does anybody in the audience have a copy handy of the amendment as it came out of Health and Human Services in the Senate?
I thought I do if like me email to you. I'll print a copy. Yeah. It's online, yeah. I'll shoot you the link. I think I got your. By the way, in case you guys are wondering how legislation works, this is it. Like just this is the smoke-filled back room. You're seeing it in real time. This one goes. My niece named Paige. All right, there's the page. Okay. Representative Paige, I just texted you the link.
Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. So, well, a couple things. Let's not call it a pilot program because we all know it's not. Let's just like be intellectually honest for a second. We know once it starts, it's not stopping. My only concern, outside of the fact that I'd have to, when it came to the floor, I'd have to file conflict of interest paperwork. But I guess my only concern is like, are we, and there's so few of them. I don't even know if it's worth raising the prospect of it. But it's like, if you make $225,000, why are we subsidizing you? But I don't think that's the point of it. It's more of a try to get people into the workforce.
Yeah, if I may, I feel like the issue is do we want teachers in classrooms?
Yeah, no,
And
no,
if
it's a fair. I just raised the point of like, is that really even how we're looking at it at this point? Because, $72,000. So currently, a single mother working in childcare would be covered up to $72,000 of some benefit. Right? Does anybody refute that? No. Okay. So we're really talking about what happens when they start making more, which if they're working in childcare, they're probably no longer in the size 2 gap. Yes, did you? Yes.
I think the issue is people who are married.
Yeah, that's what I'm about to talk. That's what I'm about to
Yeah,
raise.
okay,
Yeah,
It's
that's where I was
dual
going next.
income household issue that when the individual childcare workers' income starts to like not keep pace with the cost of care, that they bow out. And so that is the population really that we're trying to capture with this particular program. A lot of the childcare workers will fall under the 85% of SMI in the existing program. It's the dual income households that are having the workers that have to make the choice of one person leaving. And the person that often would leave is the mom and the childcare worker. So if we can keep them in there, if that family unit right now made over $100,000, that worker is coming out of the workforce because they have no scholarship. They would not be eligible. So those are the types of situations that we're trying to capture with this particular program.
Yeah, no,
Thank
that's
you for
that's the point I was about to
entertaining me.
raise. Is we're not really talking. I keep thinking about the single mom with one kid in the childcare center, right? But the reality is she is likely covered already by this. So we, to that point, we really are talking about either multiple kids, or we've got a high income. They doesn't have to necessarily be a spouse because they don't have to be married to count the money. So I guess the question is, so we're really talking about families of 3 that make more than $90,000 a year, right? Oh, I'm looking at the sheet, so I'm kind of cheating. To be fair, $89,180. But I rounded up. Let's go back to the fiscal note on this, on the amended version. Oh, that's the Senate notes. I've got more tabs open for this bill. Amended by the Senate. Why did they do this horrible Second Amendment? I love the Second Amendment, but why did they do this Second Amendment? Third Amendment, yes. So to that will be used against me in some hit piece. Why did they do the Second Amendment's horrible?
I think that's a question for Senator Bradley. I think.
Well, I tried.
I'd be happy to
I
chat
wasn't
with him
trying
about
to.
it.
I wasn't trying to throw Senator Whitley under the bus because she clearly made it known she didn't support. And I did look up the vote count. She did not vote for the Second Amendment to the bill. The vote was 13-11 in the Senate. Let's read their report. So, hearing reports. They literally didn't write anything. It just. Where is the. Okay. So it's going to hit a default. No, because it's 7% of their income. Okay. Let's get an amendment together to bring back the second version of it that doesn't have the laughable $18 million funding note on it. I'll take it to my caucus when they decide that they want to come back to committee. Let's get that drafted. I don't want my name to go on it because be a benefit directly from my employees. To be fair, just one of them, but
Yeah.
So I don't like that. Just seems very self-serving. And then we'll meet back up here next Wednesday at 10 a.m. And if we have any changes, I'll let Representative Wallner know. But I think that's probably the prudent course of action.
Do we want?
We can probably change the appropriation to be a little bit less than the original, since it only needs to go to June.
I wondered what you were going to do about the appropriation. Maybe we should talk to the department about whether, because it is only for 6 months.
Well, it's for 6 months, and then after that,
Well, we're not.
Appropriates 2.3
hate
in
to-
this plan.
isn't the state doing really well right now?
Well,
Which one is it? Which one is it today? Are we broke or are we flush? I can't remember which press release went out.
I mean, it'll end up being a budget discussion, I think,
Yeah.
in the future. I think what you need is the first hit of money to get it up and running.
Which is 2.55. Right? That's the appropriation for it, minus a $250,000 setup fee, which $250,000 setup fee is a hell of a setup fee, but should start bidding on those things. The $250,000 to
Don't have
add
to do
some
one a
names
year.
in seems a little aggressive, but okay. Because it uses NH connections, right? So it's all Salesforce, I imagine. No, it's not. All right, good, because otherwise I used to work with Salesforce. So. Anyways, I think. I mean, the reality is the state's either going to fund it or it's not. Like, because are you talking about when you're talking about getting the more appropriate appropriations? Like, what are you talking about? What do you mean by that?
I think it's high, right?
I think, yeah, I think it's high.
How high do you
actually.
think it is?
Well, is the 2.5 million, was that for one full year or a half a year? One full year. But you aren't going to be functioning this pilot except for a half a year
Right.
until it's the next budget.
Right. It says the sum of 2.3 for
Welcome
the fiscal
back.
year ending June 30th, 2025.
Or we could just leave this to the finance committee.
That's what I wanted to do.
Okay,
That's
just
what I
why
wanted to
don't-
do.
Why don't we just, yeah.
That's what I wanted to do, and they can figure out what they want to do with the money, or if they have it or not. Because it's amazing what they'll fund or what they won't fund.
If you're really just looking at fiscal year 25 and then something that would be perhaps incorporated into the state's budget.
I think that's the way it would have to work,
And
actually. I don't think that,
And
we
I-
don't,
I think that's difficult if it's a pilot program. I know
Yeah.
we're not wanting to use that word.
Nothing more permanent. Nothing more
But
permanent than a
if we're gonna
temporary
have
program.
permanent program, I just want to make sure that it's clear there. I would want an opportunity to evaluate other costs of administering a permanent program. For a pilot is different because we're looking at instituting things like audits, fair hearings, and being able to administer it from that perspective. I just want to make sure, there may not be anything else, but I just want to make sure if we're looking at it from a more permanent basis, that we have an opportunity to evaluate that.
Yes, furthermore.
so if you have 2.4 or 2.5 appropriated for 6 months, but you only have 6 months to spend it, you would anticipate that you're going to have money at the end of the 6 months. Is it non-lapsing? Have you written that into it, that it's non-lapsing?
Yes.
So,
Nailed it.
okay, so it would, half of it would come over into the next 6 months. So you've only really got a 1-year pilot. Right?
I'm a little confused. We're talking about this bill that came out of the House and Senate Health and Human Services. Okay.
Yeah, so from that particular fiscal note, we were looking at, a range of 1.4 to 1.6 million for fiscal year 2025, because we wouldn't start until January. So the 6 months of the rest of fiscal year 25, that range, so call it 1.5 for simplicity if you want. For a full year, we were looking at 2.4 to 2.9, call it. So if you want to look at, or I'm sorry, 2.7 to 2.9 was the range for fiscal year 26.
Okay, so Russ, let's just go with the way it came out of the Senate.
Yeah,
And
I
because
think
once it hits finance, it'll have
they'll
other
do.
questions.
You guys will do what you guys do in finance. Yeah, nerds. Too soon. All right. Okay.
But I understand what you're saying.
Any other comments from the four remaining members of the committee on this bill? You gonna take the lead on this, Representative Wallner? Who's gonna take the lead on it? It cannot be me, because I'm gonna have to file conflict of interest paperwork. I won't vote for it on the floor. I don't have a problem with the committee, but I'll vote. I can't vote. I can't vote on this in. I could declare an interest, but I won't, because it's a direct government benefit to me. So I won't be voting for it, because I get enough of those accusations as it is. So.
Do we have one of your other Republican members of this committee who would co-sponsor it with us?
Probably Dee Simone would be the first one I would think of, so I can ask her.
Can you ask her? That would
Yeah,
be great.
I
Thank
can
you.
ask her. She may say no. She reserves the right to say no. But
You can ask.
I'll ask. I get told no all the time. It's like a it's a happy day for me. Any other questions, comments, concerns? All right, thank you. We'll be back at 10 a.m. on next Wednesday. I've already sent in the thing. Sorry. Okay. And we have no other bills. They're giving us. I talked to you yesterday. We are getting no other bills. This is it. This is it. This is actually it. This is actually it. We're adjourned.